I had not slept in 4 days when I first heard the knocking. It was not the kind of knocking you hear at a door. It was the kind you hear inside a wall. Soft, deliberate, patient. 3 knocks, a silence. 3 knocks again, evenly spaced. Not pipes, not the building settling into the cold. Something that understood rhythm. I lived alone in the house I had inherited from my mother, a 2-story colonial on the edge of a town that had been shrinking for 30 years. Most of the neighboring houses were dark at night. I worked remotely, translating legal documents, and I had chosen to stay not out of sentimentality, but because the house was paid for and silence was good for concentration. The silence had ended 3 weeks ago, the night after my mother's funeral. I told myself grief does things to the body. I knew this clinically. I knew that the bereaved hear things, that the mind, desperate to undo an absence, manufactures presence. I gave myself this explanation the way you give a child a placebo, kindly, without full belief. The knocking came from the east wall of the upstairs hallway, the wall that on the other side contained nothing, just the exterior of the house, the wood siding, the cold October air. There was no cavity there large enough for anything living. I pressed my ear to the plaster and heard only the knocking, closer now, intimate, like a secret being tapped in Morse. On the 5th night, I set up my phone to record. I propped it against the hallway baseboard facing the east wall, started the recording, and went to bed. I lay in the dark and listened to the house and heard nothing, which was its own kind of wrong. The house had always had ambient sound. The refrigerator cycling, the wind finding gaps in the eaves, the small, creaking democracy of old wood. That night, there was nothing. Total silence, as though the house were holding its breath. I fell asleep without meaning to. In the morning, I played back the recording. 4 hours and 11 minutes of silence, and then, at the 3-hour and 52-minute mark, the knocking. 3 beats. Silence. 3 beats. And then a sound I had to listen to 4 times before I trusted what I was hearing. A voice. My mother's voice, low and close to the wall, saying my name the way she had said it when I was a boy and had done something wrong. Not angry, not frightened, just weighted with a knowing I had never been able to stand. 2 syllables carrying the full history of being known by someone. I sat with the phone in my hands for a long time. I was a rational man. I believed in grief and auditory hallucination and the tricks exhaustion plays on the mind. I set the phone down on the kitchen table and made coffee and drank it standing at the window looking out at the dead garden. Then I went upstairs with a hammer. I told myself I was checking for an animal, something that had gotten into the wall cavity, something that had died there. I was thorough about this story. I carried it all the way to the east wall, all the way to the first swing of the hammer, the plaster cracking and caving in a way that was somehow both satisfying and terrible. There was no animal. There was no gap in the siding. There was only insulation, old and grey, packed between the studs. And pressed into the insulation, carefully, deliberately, as though placed there by hands that had taken their time, were my mother's reading glasses, her house keys, and a photograph of me at age 7 that had been sitting in a frame on the mantelpiece downstairs. I checked the mantelpiece. The frame was there. The photograph was still inside it. I stood in the hallway with my hammer and looked at the 2 photographs. One in my hand, one in the frame below, identical, and understood that whatever was in my house was not confused about what it was doing. It was not a residue. It was not a memory made material by grief. It was making a point. That night, I sat in the hallway with my back against the opposite wall, facing the hole I had made, and I waited. The house was silent in that total, breathless way. The hole was dark inside. At 3 in the morning, the knocking started again. From deeper in now. Not from the east wall, but from below it. From the foundation. From somewhere that should have been solid earth and stone, and nothing else. 3 knocks. Silence. And then the wall moved. Not all at once, not dramatically, just a slow, wet bulge in the plaster, like something pressing its full weight against the other side. The paint cracked in a long vertical line. Dust fell, and through the crack came the smell. Copper and turned milk, and something sweet underneath that I recognized, God help me, as the smell of my mother's house when I was a child. The smell of Sunday mornings, the smell of being safe. I did not move. I could not move. The crack widened, and through it came a hand. It was my mother's hand. I knew every line of it, every knuckle. The small scar on the index finger from a kitchen accident in 1987 that she had never let a doctor look at. I knew this hand the way I knew my own name. It was reaching for me. And the worst part, the part that has not left me, the part I carry into every room I enter and every dark I try to sleep in, is that I reached back. The moment my fingers touched hers, the wall came apart entirely. Cold air rushed out of the cavity, cold and deep as a grave, and her grip tightened around my hand with a strength that was nothing like my mother's, a strength that was old and patient and had been waiting a very long time. And she pulled. I screamed. I braced my feet against the baseboard and pulled back with everything I had, and for a long, terrible moment it was equal, me against whatever wore my mother's hand. And then something gave. I fell backward into the hallway, my hand free, and lay there gasping on the floor. The wall was smooth, unbroken, no hole, no crack, no hand. But on my palm, where her fingers had gripped mine, were 4 deep bruises in the shape of fingertips. They did not fade for 3 weeks. And on the night they finally disappeared, I heard, from the east wall, 1 single knock. Just one, like something marking my name off a list. Thank you for listening. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so the next ones find you in the dark. We will see you next time.